Hi, I'm Francois from Production Music Live, today with Producer Notes, and we're taking a look at the Afro House styles of RBØR, Andor Gabriel, a track called OK. We have a fully arranged track here in Ableton modeled after this reference song, and we are only using Ableton stock effects and instruments plus Serum to produce this, and also PML samples from this Afro House Volume 3 sound pack. Also, the project file is part of that sound pack together with 4 other ones. And we have a track that lasts around 4.5 minutes with an intro. Then we bring in the bass. Plus the typical Afro House plucks, one-note plucks. And then we bring in the piano. Until we get into our first bridge. Where the first tension is coming up, and then the first drop is hitting at around 1 minute with these vocal shots on top. Pianos are gone here, and then the pianos come back in towards the second turnaround of the drop. And then it winds down into the first break where the vocals come back. And we have this counterpoint melody with the leads here. Then it winds down into the drop until we have this what's labeled here as bridge, where some LFOs are coming in to announce the main drop. So it's a drop without drums, essentially, and then after a little bit of a delayed build-up here, we are actually dropping, half a minute later. Adding some percs in between percussions. Then adding in the piano. And then building up tension. And then we are going into the outro. Where elements are getting taken out over time, and we are left with a monotonous part that can be then mixed into the next track. And if we quickly listen to the groups and solo, kind of like the drum loop here. That's what it sounds like. And then we also have the bass. So 2 sub basses here sitting on top of one another, and then you have this kind of almost sounding like a didgeridoo thing. Bring it back at the beginning. We'll take a look at that in a minute, and then we have our instruments group down here. Plucky Afro vibes plus some drones in the background that are providing the Atmo. Plus then the pianos that are coming in. We are using a sampled Ableton piano here. You can replace that with your favorite piano plugin on your own computer, but we wanted to make sure that this is very usable to anybody. So it's Ableton Stock and Serum. Yeah, and then also in the instruments group, we have these two lead elements for the main lead. So that's the group overview. Quick bio of the original artists. RBØR are two brothers released on Spinning and on Future Rave, and they have these rhythm-driven beats, distinctive sound that blends deep, hypnotic beats and melodic elements. And Andor Gabriel from Romania makes Afro House, melodic house, complex rhythms, powerful bass lines, ethereal melodies, also released on Spinning and Universal, and has its own label called Natural Elements. And the reference track is called OK. Okay, so let's take a look at the single element, starting with the drums and the kick here. It's pretty snappy. Sometimes we have a low cut on it in different parts of the arrangement. Snappy kick. And it's part of the Afro House sample pack part of this sound pack. And you can find it in the one-shots here. And we are combining that with a whole bunch of things, but I want to start with the toms and perc loops here. Let's throw in the perc loop. So there's your driving Latin rhythm already. You can see this one has a bit of tail towards it. It's kind of swooshing towards the end, which is nice. And the positioning compared to the kick is 4th beat in the first hit and 3rd beat in the second hit. And that's what we are repeating here all the time. All these samples are also part of that sample kit. And then we have the tom towards the end here, chiming in as well. And there you already have a nice rhythmical setup going. And now we can put this thing called bell into the mix as well. Sitting here, if we look at one bar, it's sitting in position 3 and 1. Of the second beat and the third beat. And you might be wondering, what about reverb? And we have a send effect 1 here, which is Hall send effect, and we have 3 seconds of decay time, a rolling of low end and it's sidechained, and then this later gets sent into our master, which is a very simple setup as well here. Just a bit of compression and limiters and slight saturation to fatten up the sound. So that's the bell kind of thing. At the beginning we have this crash. But I'm putting that off for a second, and now we have this top drums group here, where we have a bunch more elements. For example, this percussion. And it's also very nice to have this one take a break here, because if this goes through all the way, it will easily start to sound boring at some point, but sometimes music is being defined by what's not playing, by when something's not playing, by the silence in between, and that's really important here. Also, we are playing, in this beat we are playing 3 elements, and in that beat we're playing 4. So there's nice variation going on here. And we also have a clap playing, but not in the traditional sense of the electronic music, but it's sitting It's much more marching, sitting here in the beginning of our pattern of the first bar. Yeah, nice pounding rhythm. And let's move a bit forward. In our drop parts, we're not really doing that much else here with these elements. Sometimes we're playing a percussion or a tom or this percussion towards the outro somewhere else. But let's finish looking at the drop elements here by going into the cymbals group, where we have hi-hats and shakers essentially. So we have this simple classic shaker loop, bit of variation in there, sometimes a bit harder, sometimes a bit softer, sometimes a bit late, sometimes a bit more early. So that works great. And then we are combining that with this one here in this position, which takes some time to be fully active. That's why it's being set a bit early. Notice how it's only here and it's not playing here as well. This is kind of important. We're not doing this. We're just playing the second. These are like differences to classic house music. But what we do have in classic house music, and we also have it here, is our offbeat hat. And this one even has a bit of a ride sitting on top here. So that's really the peak time element or the main drop element here. We are playing it not all the time, we are not playing it here, but we are playing it there where we want to emphasize and give the impression that this is one of the, high energy parts of the track. And then in between, well, what does it sound solo, by the way? And then in between, we have these hat loops playing here. So 16th notes with a closed hi-hat playing the 16th note, and then every third in a beat we are playing an extra hi-hat on top of it. Okay, let's play it all together. Very nice. On the cymbals group, we have this EQ here rolling off low and in the middle, and on both the sides and the middle rolling off some nasty high end, and it's being automated whenever we need that in the gain. On the group itself, we have a bit of compression and saturation, and on this toms group, we are able to filter it in, and we are adding a bit of reverb in for arrangement purposes sometimes. We quickly take a look here towards the build up and drop. And we bring it back to dry. Okay, we had a bunch of rim shots here in that build up as well. Let's quickly take a look at those. Here the rears are quite open. That's modeled after the reference track. That's what it sounds like in the sum. And let's go over to the bass elements here where we have our sub. And then we have the second sub, which is playing the tail. Make sure you're on headphones or on good speakers. Okay, so it's divided up. We have this sub playing on track 25 here with Serum. Let's take a look at the sound setup. Pretty simple stuff. -3 octaves, sine wave, -2 octaves here. Nothing in the effects, nothing going on in Matrix. Is the most basic sound. And the second one, let's take a look at this setup. No processing on that sound either. And we have -2 octaves, saw rounded to square wave. That's the one so the tail one is the one we are listening to. Nothing crazy going on. We just have this extra saw rounded to square wave sitting on top, cutting through a little more than that deep sine wave on sub 1, and that's playing the higher frequencies here an octave higher and creating a bit more upper harmonics. And then on top of that, we have bass mid, just kind of almost like sounds like almost like a didgeridoo. We have this setup with crush, wub, and basic shapes sine wave. One voice each, and this one is 2 octaves higher than that one, a couple of semitones pitched, high dimension expansion and hyper a bit open in the mix here as well, slightly detuned, and we have envelope 2 controlling the filter cutoff. So this one here controls the filter, MG low pass 12 decibels per octave, so not that filtered. And then utility widens the sound, and this EQ here makes sure the other 2 elements, bass elements, are not being messed with. So all of it combined. And we also have a pretty straightforward and simple chord progression. The low note here is being played, is playing E, the one we don't see right now, and then we go D, E, B. And that's already the story here of our bass. We're then sidechaining it with this sort of custom home-built LFO tool thing. And then we are sidechaining all of it again to our kick. So basically this track has a 1 bar chord progression if you want. And let's take a closer look at how that works with our instruments group here, and we sort of need to take a look at our piano to do that. So I'm moving forward a bit to this part where the pianos are actually playing and starting the instruments analysis with the piano. Let's take a look. It's also sidechain, so don't worry about that click. So we're playing E here, just like our bass note. And then we're playing the 5th on top. And then a quick D. And then we're playing G major with the root note D. Because if you take down G, there's a major 3rd here, and then we are introducing root note D quickly. This can be done, this works very well when you quickly switch chords. And you can get very interesting, because if you play them one after another and listen to them in a long fashion, sounds a bit like pretty classical or something, but if you play that type of stuff fast, then it's making a lot of sense. So this one here is an A minor with a root note C, and then the last one is a D major. If we bring up A, major 3rd, minor 3rd. A is just voiced down, because then we have a pretty stable chord setup here. You know, top note is switching by a semitone, bottom note is switching by 1 tone, and mid part of the chords is also just switching by a whole tone here. That always makes for an interesting sounding chord progression in parentheses. Okay, so these go together with the bass notes. Let's play those things together quickly. I'm soloing the bass line. Yeah, and for usability purposes, we've sampled a piano here and threw in the samples quickly just like that, but you can also load up your favorite piano VST, maybe the Arturia one or some other ones. Rolled off low end on the in the middle, rolled off capped on the sides here, and then these two filters are bringing it in and out over time in the arrangement. And then utility taking the balance a bit to the right. Okay, and now the second part of the melodic elements that is going on here is these two lead sounds. So we have again, we have a bring up E, and you can see it's an E minor chord very easily. Minor third, major third, bring it back down. And it's a combination out of two wavetables here. We have the basic MCB, looking a bit like a rounded saw wave, and that one has one voice, and combined with the also nice and soft sounding basic mini, which is a combination of a sine wave and a saw wave in a sense, but we have 8 voices of that one, a bit detuned here, and we're sending that through a filter, which is just naturally in this position. We're not automating it here, but we are automating it with this auto filter on the entire group. So here you can see the automation curve that's being applied on both of these sounds. Okay, and what is being mixed in? This one is called lead chord low. And this one is sort of beefing up the sound in the lower mid frequencies. And in this case, we are just using 8 voices of a saw wave. And that's a bit more detuned here. So this one is more open, this detuning. Pretty short decay time here as well. But release at 222 milliseconds, so it's not cutting off too soon. And let's listen to the first setup with and without the lower one. And you notice how this is more subtle, but it definitely changes the character of the sound and makes it sound fatter. You can also listen to it here in the back. And what happens if we quickly turn off this high cut here? We're just removing some unwanted high frequencies here that are better being covered by our drum elements. And okay, so let's move over to the next element here, which is this LFO chord that comes in once in front of the drop. It's 2 long E's stacked on top of one another. Not much happening in the beginning. That's why we are starting to play it here from the back. Carved out low and high ends, and in the sound itself the sound design is set up in a way where it's the similar waveform we had here in both oscillators. And now our mod wheel and rate are being set up and controlled here. So let's take a look at what's going on. Let's actually add in the rate here as well, so we can see that too. So rate is coming down, mod wheel is coming up. What are these controlling? Let's quickly check the matrix. Mod wheel is controlling the LFO bus 1 and LFO bus 2, and LFO 1 is controlling the amplitude or amplifier. And macro 1 is controlling LFO 1 rate. Okay, so this is LFO 1, this is LFO 2, but we focus on LFO 1 for now. So we're controlling the speed, how fast LFO is running with the rate. And we're coming from fast to going to slower. And once it's open up, we're leaving the node untouched. And the node is being played flat when it's not applied anymore, and the amp is not moving, so it's just open. Very cool sound. And let's move over to these one note pluck elements and our sort of drones here. We have this one playing. Typical Afro House pluck. We rolled off a lot of mid frequencies here in the low mids. Let's take a look at the sound setup. We have basic mini playing, one voice, and then it's set up plucky. But we're using this filter here for our pluckiness. Again, what controls the filter frequency, it's the mod wheel. So this one is being automated over time, and the initial pluckiness is achieved by the decay here in envelope 1, short decay. Bit of reverb in the sound, EQ rolling off some low end, and then that final filter. Second sound below that, ARP2. Bit more voices, bit more scattered to the sides. Here we have 6 voices, and LFO1 controlling the levels here, as well as the cutoff. And then at times we're opening up the reverb, completely washing that out with a size of 35% and a decay time of 4.7. Both together. Nice setup, and pluck ARP3. That one is just sitting on top there. And if you're wondering, hey, it feels a bit groovy, what's going on? It doesn't look like the velocities are being moved around. So envelope 2, controlling the filter, mod wheel the reverb again. And it gets sidechained on the entire group here. That's already achieving this perceived groove. And pluck sign. It's kind of the belly of this one. Playing lower, and we have sine wave. Okay, and below that we have sine key. What is this one doing? Just a bit of Atmo thrown in there with the first note, but not fully through. This is also interesting because we are not in a melodic house track, so we don't want to play, You maybe notice there's no pad or something playing through, because this is more groovy in the setup. We just sort of fake the pad. We act as if there was one, but it then stops, and then some other elements quickly pick up, and then we are starting again. So it feels like there is one, but there's not really one playing through, sustained at least. And we have this one sitting below, an octave lower. Also sine waves here in this sound. It's the most simple setup, but it's very effective. It just works. Okay, and the arrangement we looked at in the beginning, we have this, it's a Spotify track, it's a radio setup, I would call it, I think. And what we haven't looked at yet was a bunch of elements here in the build up towards the second drop. We still have that snare roll. Very simple. We had a cowbell here in the beginning. Let's take a look at that here in the beginning with the other elements. And where we also have this perc loop playing here in the beginning. Similar to the cowbell. Alright, so let's have a summary of our key elements here. We have a clean kick below everything. And then it's super important to have these tom and perc loops below. Everything has its place, not interfering too much with one another. Claps in the beginning. Another percussive loop. With breaks in between to keep it interesting. It just grooves more. It's more fun to dance to if it's not playing through all the time. Okay, then shakers to fill it out subtly. And hi-hats on top of it for drive. No clap position in the classical EDM or house sense. And now it's basically one bar bass pattern, or also one bar chord progression thing, with the low bass, the low sub in the first hit, then the tail of the bass being played by the second sub element, and the mid bass element emphasizing on the higher frequencies, a bit wider on the sub. Very hypnotic somehow. Yeah, and it sort of perfectly supports the piano. We need to switch quickly to a different part where they're actually playing together, where we have the piano and the bass set up here. I think the most important thing here, arrangement-wise and also composition-wise, is we have breaks in between these parts. Nothing's playing all the way through. So these quick riffs here are being supported by our bass line. And then we have a counter melody sort of against that, which is this saw synth. Aiming a bit to fill out the frequencies and also the pauses. So one is bringing the electronic character, like the piano is bringing the more natural instrument character, and also you could argue that the percussions and these Latin drums and also the fluffy bass line are more sounding pretty natural, and now the electronic component is coming in. We haven't really looked at the vocals, but they are now also playing an important part here. They're bringing in this tribal feel. So these vocals here that are from our Afro House vocals pack. Yeah, and then the delays and reverbs open up towards the, you know, if I'm quickly putting that out, you can see it always towards the end, and then into this break we are delaying it a bit. Dry here. And now it wouldn't be Afro House without the one note pluck playing below everything here, so that's also a typical ingredient always. And in a way, these are already also creating what other tracks have as a pad. And other than that, no real effects section going on here. It's very straightforward. We have a crash here and we have sort of a snare roll. But everything else is kind of achieved by opening up reverbs on certain elements here over time and then closing them again whenever we are, you know, going into the drop. Okay, so that's it for this one. I hope you enjoyed this little walkthrough. We'll have a playthrough of the entire track in just a second. And if you enjoyed this content, feel free to check out the links in the description to this Afro House Volume 3 pack. If you want to start to finish, learn how to produce Afro House, we have a full Afro House start to finish also linked in the description as well. An online course with great knowledge right from the pros. Also Afro House vocal pack linked in the description. D Premium drums sample pack series, our flagship drum series, in the description. And if you're saying, hey, this all sounds great, then check out the Everything bundle from Production Music Live, the biggest and greatest and best deal in the store. It's absolutely insane and the best way to support our work on Production Music Live and these YouTube channels, and also the quick tips on Instagram and everything we're doing. So thank you for your time and attention. I'll speak to you again soon.
Holy water,